Hey, I'm Alicia, your non-monogamous relationship coach, and today on Nope, We're Not Monogamous, I'm joined by the legendary Kathy Labriola, a counselor, a nurse, and an author who's been guiding polyamorous and non-monogamous people for decades. The updated second edition of her book, Love and Abundance, A Counselor's Advice on Open Relationships, was just released a couple of weeks ago, and it's packed with decades of polyamorous wisdom. So, today we're going to talk about mastering jealousy. You can learn why jealousy arises, how it differs from envy or coveting, and how to address its root causes. We're also talking about solo polyamory versus relationship anarchy. So, there's like a whole diverse relationship style that can really impact emotional dynamics. So, we're going to look at that, plus some strategies for emotional growth, discover ways to build trust, embrace openness, and create more honest communication, more deep communication in your relationships. And we're also going to talk about coming out as polyamorous or non-monogamous. Kathy shares a really unique platform release strategy for navigating this process. You'll want to check it out. So whether you are dealing with feelings of insecurity, navigating new relationships, curious about the distinctions between jealousy and envy, all the different things, this episode has some game-changing perspectives for you. And if you enjoy this episode or any of the episodes, do me a really huge favor and leave a review. This is the number one way for a podcast to grow and get noticed by more people. You would be making a really huge impact on the world with this one little tiny thing, and I would appreciate you. Enjoy. Bye. Yay, awesome. I'm excited that you're here again.
Can't get rid of me. Can't get rid of me.
Good. This is a good problem to have. You were on episode 79. So that was probably 11 episodes ago or so, which is great because I come out every 2 weeks.
Wow, you are busy, a busy little bee. That's great.
Well, I mean, not as busy as you. You're writing books.
That's true. For some reason, I keep thinking I have more to say, and then I have to write another book. My only reason for writing books is I only write books when I've waited for years for someone else to write that book, and no one does, and I'm annoyed. So I think, well, why didn't someone else write this so I don't have to?
Well, I'll just say the things then, right?
Just
Amazing.
wishing someone else would do it. Luckily, there are lots more books coming out about various types of consensually non-monogamous relationships. So it's a very exciting time. The last few years, in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been more books coming out about polyamory and non-monogamy than I've ever seen in all the time I've been involved in this.
Yeah,
which is a long time.
It's amazing. We have so many resources now, and also still not enough.
There's definitely room for more. So,
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for you to write your book. So I'll buy that book as soon as it comes out.
Maybe next year.
Okay, I want an autographed copy.
All right, it's yours. You're first on the list. So this is this a second edition of Love and Abundance?
Yes, it is.
Amazing. So Love and Abundance, A Counselor's Advice on Open Relationships. I read this book in probably 2014, I think. So this was really fun to see a new updated version. I'm curious, what was your favorite update or favorite thing to add?
Well, I added a whole introductory chapter because so much has happened in the world of polyamory and non-monogamy since I wrote the book initially in 2008. So in just 15 years, an awful lot has changed, and so an update that was the only reason an update was needed, that all this positive change had happened since then.
Yeah.
So that part was my favorite to write, to say, well, when I wrote the first book, I was interviewed on a lot of radio shows and by and by journalists for print newspapers and magazines, because that's all we had at the time. Podcasts and other things, and online newspapers and things hadn't really been invented yet. So I was interviewed on a lot of radio shows and by a lot of newspapers and magazines, and the reporters, I would have to spend the first half of the interview explaining what consensual non-monogamy and polyamory were, because they had not really had a clue about it. And they almost always confused it with non-consensual polygamy, where women are forced into marriage, whether they like it or not, with men who have multiple wives. So there was a total lack of understanding of the big difference between those two things. And, I was often being, attacked and vilified by these reporters for, they always said I was encouraging adultery and, destroying the family and all these other things, which I'm afraid I don't have the power to do, even if I wanted to. They were giving me credit or blame for a lot of things that are kind of out of my control.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I found that really fascinating, actually, reading in your introduction about how much and negativity you faced in releasing that book and interviewing and talking to people about it. And I'll tell you, that was one of my biggest fears in starting this podcast. Was like, man,
Mm.
I'm like, can I handle that kind of backlash or outcome? And that actually hasn't happened. So I just want to thank you for seriously paving a path here.
Mhm. Well, there's certainly still plenty of haters out there on the
Sure.
internet that want to, email you or call you or threaten you and everything else, but it's not remotely like it was back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's great that things have changed so much, and I'm very grateful that a lot has changed and that it's a lot, I think, a lot less scary for people now to try to navigate this type of non-traditional relationship, and they're not nearly in as much danger, both physically and psychologically, of, like, facing rejection by their families, and fears of losing their jobs if they come out at work, and that is all still out there, but not nearly as pronounced as before.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, it's definitely still a fear that a lot of people have. I'm curious, when you're talking to people about that, what what kind of advice do you give people when they're worried about being rejected by their families or losing their jobs because of being polyamorous or non-monogamous?
Well, I usually encourage them to keep their non-monogamous relationships private at first, until they learned how to really engage in this type of relationship successfully and in a healthy way, and until they're more sure that this is the path they really want in their lives,
Yeah.
before they decide to come out at work or come out to their families, or even to just be a little more public about it,
Mhm.
because many people do try this type of relationship and decide eventually it's not really for them, or
Mhm.
that it's something they want to do now, but it's not like a long-term, lifelong relational orientation for them. And so I usually encourage people to really see how it works for them first, to work out their own problems around it, and then if they decide this is really what they want long term and that they really are up for it, then is the time to start coming out to the people around them. I especially think this is important if you're considering, for instance, uh, including more than one partner in your life publicly, like if you're going to be bringing that partner to work related functions and events, or if you're going to be bringing that partner or partners home to meet family. I've seen too many people go through thinking they're madly in love with a new person and bringing everybody home to meet mom, and then like a month later, the whole thing blows up and breaks. They break up, and then they're left trying to explain that to their family. So I usually say any new relationship, wait at least a year before like introducing them to family or work or your coworkers, or really being more public so that you don't have to deal with it. You have to feel pretty certain that person is going to be in your life longer term before
Yeah.
wanting to present the relationships to family and coworkers and friends.
Yeah. 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 That makes a lot of sense. You really got to kind of pick your battles. Like, is this something you want to really go to war over? And like managing, like one thing, especially if you've been monogamous and you're new to non-monogamy, you're navigating all of the emotions that come, and like the logical parts, like navigating
Mhm.
calendars and schedules and stuff, like that takes a lot of bandwidth. And then also trying to like educate people and explain to them about your choices and defend yourself takes another whole lot of bandwidth. And so then you're starting to pile those things on top of each other.
Well, yeah, and to make sure everyone's on board. I mean, I've seen so many people who are in a marriage or, cohabiting relationship with someone. They're bringing another partner into the situation, and the partner at home may not be 100% okay with things yet. And yet then you're introducing this other person to your friends and family and everybody, and your own partner is maybe extremely uncomfortable with that
Mm,
level of like having to deal with that level of public relations. Then
yeah.
they're having to defend your choice of doing this when they may not really be okay with it. So that's really putting someone in a very difficult position, if that
Yeah.
they are having their own issues of jealousy and feeling displaced and feeling, hurt by this, and yet then they're having to put up a public front of like, oh yeah, everything's great, we're perfectly happy with this. So
Yeah.
don't put a pre-existing partner in that position unless they're really ready for this level of
Yeah.
disclosure.
Yeah. 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 That's really great advice, actually, because we often say like go as slow as the slowest partner. Um, but that, yeah, is kind of throwing your person under the bus when they want to be supportive of you, uh and yet they're having to, I don't know, be more supportive than they naturally would be.
Right, then they really to sort of fake it when
Yeah.
they're not really quite there yet. So,
Yeah.
well, and I also think it's very important to think through the potential consequences,
Hmm.
because there's a lot of pressure on us within the poly community to be like totally out there and public. But some people face way more consequences than others.
Yeah.
There can be a very high price to pay for being out of the closet. I mean, this is especially true for people who are either working class or poor, or people
Hmm.
who are people of color who really may face way more consequences because they have less privileges and less resources if they lose their jobs or because of it, or if someone threatens to take away their children, take away custody of their children. If they have to go to court to fight that, they don't maybe have the money or resources for attorneys, and they're going to be at much more risk in a court situation than someone else. So it's important to think through what are the potential costs and consequences. Are you ready and able to manage that, or is that going to destroy your relationship and possibly, create severe financial hardships for you? And I think a
Hmm.
lot of times people aren't really thinking those things through. um, I sometimes say there's a price to pay for coming out of the closet. There's a price for staying in the closet too, in that you have
Yeah.
to then be possibly lying to other people like your family or your coworkers, or you have to be sneaking around, or you're having to be doing some of the things that we're trying to avoid by being openly polyamorous. So there's an internal and emotional price to pay, and you may be harming the people that you're in relationship with by feeling like you have to hide them, and then they start to feel like they're a secret, or that you're ashamed, or that could create a lot of issues too. So both figuring out what you're facing if you do come out further, come out more out of the closet, and figuring out what you are actually going to lose by staying in the closet is also, all of that is very important.
Yeah. Yeah. That's extremely, it's like balancing, balancing or weighing the pros and cons, the costs and the consequences of whatever decisions you make. Is there, I'm curious if you have a way that you recommend that people um, do that equation. Like how do they figure out like what could happen on either side?
Well, you're always making guesses to some
Yeah.
extent, because you can't 100% predict how your family members are going to respond, or how your coworkers are going to respond. I usually recommend the same, what I call the platform release strategy, which is something that, as queer people, we used to use back in the day, say back in the 1960s and 70s, and I'm old enough to remember those days. We used to use what we called the platform release strategy, which is you release that information on a very small platform
Ah.
in order to gauge the safety of coming out. And in those days, it was really literally a matter of life and death. You could, be beaten and killed for being gay, and that still can happen, but it's a lot less likely now than it was then. So, are we going to release that information, the information that you're queer, or in this case that you're poly, to a very small platform? And usually, that if it's your family, I always recommend trying to pick the family member that you believe is the most likely to be accepting, and tell them first.
Mhm.
And you can swear them to secrecy, and to get their advice on whether they think the rest of the family is going to disown you, or not, because they probably know better than you do. They probably are going to be able to be a little more objective about it. So come out only to the person that you think is most likely to be supportive. Same thing with, say, friends. Come out to a friend that you feel is the most likely to be unjudgmental and accepting, and then get their opinion on whether there are other friends you could tell. Similarly, at work, who's the coworker that you think is most likely to be understanding and accepting? And so that's the platform release strategy, where you release it on a very small platform. If that goes well, then you can consider releasing it on a slightly larger platform.
Yeah.
That term is just based on the way movie producers decide how to release a film. They release it
Mhm.
on a very they'll if they have a film that they don't know if it's going to make a lot of money or not, they'll just release it in a few theaters in, like, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and maybe Chicago, and see how it does. And if it does makes money, they're going to release it to a lot more theaters, and then a lot more theaters after that, depending on how it does. So it's kind of a strange way of describing coming out as poly, but it's a useful metaphor.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. The platform release method. That's
Mhm.
fantastic. Just kind of gauging the response.
Right, and if you come out about being poly to the person in your family that you think is the most liberal or progressive or accepting, and they're like, "What? You're out of your freaking mind. You're crazy. You're going to hell," or whatever. Then you go, "Okay, well, then there's nobody else in my family I'm going to tell about this anytime soon."
Right. Right. Like, there we go. Now I have an idea.
But if they're like totally accepting, and they say, "Oh yeah, I think the family can handle it," they'll freak out at first, but they'll calm down and be fine, and
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's great. Amazing. Amazing. Um, I I'm curious you had you in your book you described like the different um, relationship structures, different ways of doing polyamory. And there's a question I get a lot, which is the difference between solo polyamory and relationship anarchy. And you had one in there also, a multiple non-primary relationships. And so those three, I think a lot of people mix up with each other or kind of confuse. And so I'm curious for you, how would you just like, what's the difference between them?
Well, I invented the term multiple non-primary relationships I don't know, 45 years ago or something. So, and I only invented that term along with some other terms because no terms seemed to be in existence, or I couldn't find any anyway. So I just made up things because it seemed like it described a particular style of relationship.
Yeah.
In uh, About 10 years ago, someone else, I don't know who, invented this term solo poly, and those two things are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Solo poly is, I think, a better term, and I wish I had thought of it 45 years ago, but I didn't. So someone else did, thank goodness. And I think those things are very similar. That they what they involve is someone who is not seeking a primary relationship. They're not seeking, they don't want to live together, get married, and they don't want to be part of a couple.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be single, but have fabulous love affairs and have, love, affection, uh, emotional intimacy, sex, companionship. They want all the things that people naturally want out of relationships, but they're not looking to jump on that relationship escalator and go towards living together, getting married, and really being part of a couple that is making decisions together as a couple. They want to be independent, they want to be single. And luckily, now we have that option. In the past, it was just always assumed if you were even dating someone, you were on the way to like this whole, trajectory, which would ultimately end in getting married. So that's not really what someone who's either solo poly or seeking multiple non-primary relationships is looking for. And the good news is that that's something that people can ask for but need to be very explicit about and to be very careful that they're fishing in the right pond, that they're getting together with other people in relationship that want the same thing. And oftentimes someone who's solo poly or in this multiple non primary relationship model of polyamory, they often will get involved with someone who's like already married. So they're not looking for that. They've already got that at home. Or they'll get together with other people who are also very much engaged in other things in life which preclude them from really seeking a primary relationship. And usually these are folks who are essentially married to something else. They are either married to their work, they're very, very invested in their careers, or they're very passionate about being artists or musicians, or they're single parents, a single parent raising children, and they're just very focused on that, not really wanting to have a primary relationship, or they're very devoted to political activism or some kind of social change work. So they're really just not oriented towards a primary relationship.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense. That makes sense. And then what, excuse me, what, what, what about relationship anarchy? Like it feels similar,
Hmm.
but maybe not.
Uh, well, I think it may look similar from the outside,
Mm-hmm.
but it just to the casual observer, it may look similar. But with relationship anarchy, each relationship is allowed to rise to its own natural level. Each relationship is allowed to evolve organically to whatever seems right for that relationship. And that often is not the same as solo poly. It's not, it often involves someone developing some very long-term and committed relationships. They're just not really promising anyone that it will. And they're just not, that's not what they're seeking as like the one true path of relationship. They're not entering any relationship thinking this is going to lead to living together or marriage or a committed relationship. They're entering a relationship with a very open mind. Every relationship they enter, anyone they get involved with, they have a very open mind about how this relationship may evolve, and they don't want to try to force it into any particular form. And,
Uh,
relationship anarchy does work for some people, but for a lot of people, it seems to be more of a uh, shorter term experience, like where they may be engaged in that model for a few years, but then eventually decide they really want a more hierarchical uh, relationship, in that they want one person to become more of a primary relationship. Again, for some people, it really is a long term, and relationship anarchy can be a very long term relational orientation, and it can be a long term lifestyle. My experience is that for a lot more people, it is a shorter term thing that is really a very rewarding and fulfilling relational model for them for some period of time, but not forever.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. A lot of people ask me about those things like solo poly, relationship anarchy, and then like, but isn't that just dating, right? Like, what's the difference between that and dating? And I'm usually like, well, dating to look for a monogamous partner or versus dating to meet people and continue to be polyamorous are definitely two different things. And it seems like a lot of people use those terms when that's not actually what they mean.
Use the terms like relationship anarchy.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, there's kind of an ugly underbelly to a certain segment of the poly community that ascribes to relationship anarchy. And
Sure.
what I mean by that is that it tends to be much more heterosexual men who want relationship anarchy as a way of evading any responsibility or commitment
Hmm.
to any female partner. And it, it often takes the form of them getting involved with any number of women, but not promising them anything and
Yeah,
not being committed to anything, and just keeping them guessing and keeping them in an experience of extreme insecurity, of never
yeah,
knowing what they can count on. Can I even count on a date on Saturday night? Much less any kind of ongoing relationship. Don't you feel like every week you're on a like weekly leash with this relationship? Is it going to be over next week, or is someone else going to be more important to you next week, and I'm going to be less important, or next month or whatever? So, again, I don't mean in any way to demonize the men. I've seen a few women do the same thing.
sure.
Anyone of any gender could do this, but it does seem to be sometimes an excuse for heterosexual men to uh, just be players in the old-fashioned sense,
Uh-huh.
of just wanting to have a lot of women at their beck and call, and not really promising them anything, or not really being willing to make any kind of commitment to them, which is not at all the goal of relationship anarchy. It's not that people in relationship anarchy don't make commitments to anyone. It's that they decide on a case by case basis and negotiate with each person what level of commitment they're going to have. And
Yeah.
it's for some men, unfortunately, and a few women, it is a way of evading any kind of responsibility in relationships. And similarly to the way some people who have uh, what used to be called sex addiction, but is now more often called, compulsive sexual behavior. Some people that have compulsive sexual behaviors and an unhealthy and compulsive relationship with sex will use the cover of polyamory to act out their addictive behaviors, and they're not really good relationship partners, and are likely to harm any partner that they get involved in. But they'll claim I'm just being polyamorous, but it leads to a lot of pain and suffering.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really important to to talk about those things because entirely too many people kind of wind up gaslighting themselves into accepting bad behavior or behavior that isn't at the level that they would like from their relationships because, oh, well, this partner, they say they're a relationship anarchist or they say they're polyamorous. They're not behaving the way I think that should be, but well, that's what they are. So I guess this is what I have to accept. And so I think it's important to like point out that like um not everybody is behaving as lovely and ethically as we would all like them to be.
That's very true. I mean, I think it's important to recognize that, people who engage in monogamous relationships generally do so for a mixture of healthy and unhealthy reasons.
Yep.
And people who engage in polyamorous relationships do so for a mixture of healthy and unhealthy reasons. We all we all have motivations that are very mixed. I
Yeah.
think all of us, have some woundings from our past and from our childhood and all of these other things. So, we come to relations and we have indoctrination from, our culture and from society. And from our gender training and gender
Mhm.
socialization. So none of us, I don't think, can claim that we're so enlightened that our motivations for relationships are totally clean. you they're mixed. So the best we can do is really examine our motives, examine why are we feeling compelled towards a particular relational model, whether that's monogamy or whether it's polyamory. And if it is a consensual non-monogamy, what model of it is most attractive to us and why? And as long as we can be honest with ourselves and hopefully with our partners about our both our healthy and unhealthy motivations, I think we can have very healthy relationships. I
Yeah.
just think to try to hide that shadow side and make believe that, oh, we're only motivated toward non-monogamy because that's the most enlightened relationship style, or that means we're so, we've done so much personal growth, etc. There are
Mhm.
a lot of reasons for it, and there are certainly some people in the poly community who are motivated by very unhealthy needs that they
Mhm.
probably need therapy for, rather
Yeah.
than to mess up other people's lives by dragging them into their dysfunction.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Uh,
I mean,
um,
monogamous people should look at their motivations too. What's
that.
driving them to really uh, need monogamy, or want monogamy. It could be very, very healthy, or it could be for some, very unhealthy reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That like self-awareness and self exploration.
Mhm, mhm,
We should all be doing it.
mhm. Right. I'm not judging them for being monogamous. I just think we should be looking at our own motives, and so should they, as to what's actually driving them.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Um, and there was, oh, communication. That was the other thing I want to talk to you about, because you said something in your book. You said the two keys to successfully communicating your needs to your partners are being willing to admit that you've guessed wrong about what you could handle, and telling the truth about your needs, even though you know your partner will not or may not be happy with what you're asking for. And I love that quote so much, because it's, I think, probably one of the biggest things that I see in challenges for people in relationships and non-monogamous relationships and monogamous, but just is like, can we talk about the things? Can I talk about what I want? And then I'm always telling my clients, you get to change your mind. Because when you started
Mhm.
this, you said that you wanted hierarchical, polyamory, kitchen table, like you said, you listed off the things you wanted, and then you went and had experiences and went, ooh, actually, maybe some of those things aren't what I want. You get to change your mind. You just have to talk about it.
That's true, very true. I mean, I think we just have to be humble about
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging that, well, this sounded great, but it's not really working for me. Or, uh, especially if you have egg on your face and you demanded something of your partner that you can't deliver yourself. And believe
Mm-hmm.
me, I've done that, been there. I'm sure we all have. Said,
Yeah.
well, you have had unfair expectations of your partner, and you actually can't do what you've asked them to do. So all we can do is just humbly admit that, sorry, I made a mistake. I thought this would work for me. And often that's the only way you can find out if someone has crossed your boundaries, is by having them step on your toes and go, ouch, that hurts. I mean, how would we know? Especially for people who are new to non-monogamy. How could we possibly know how we're going to feel about something that we've never experienced before?
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, we're really bad at guessing how we're going to feel about things that we haven't experienced.
Right. And how would we? Yes, how would we?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's even more ideal if before you venture into polyamory for the first time, if you're able to be honest about the fact that, well, this is all new territory. This is
Yeah.
scary. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And neither do my partners probably have any idea what they're doing. It helps if you have a partner or partners that have, done this for a long time, but that it's often you're just all stumbling around in the dark because you've never done it before. So all the more reason we need your podcast, and we need books, and we need all these great online resources that we now have, and why we need polyamory support and discussion groups, many of which exist all around. So, avail yourselves of those resources. I really encourage people to do the homework, do the reading, do listen to podcasts, find out as much information and as you can. I mean, you wouldn't try to climb Mount Everest without, training for a year, with experts and really practicing and falling down a lot in a place where you're not going to get killed,
Yeah.
as opposed to trying to climb Mount Everest and falling in the first ravine and getting killed. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And hiring a Sherpa.
there you go, lots of them, yeah, to help to do the heavy
Yes.
lifting,
Yeah.
who are because they're way more skilled at mountain climbing than we are. So, and
Yes.
so going to a coach like you, or going to a counselor like me, or finding people that you can get help from is really very important. And if you're wise, you'll do some of that before you get started with any kind of polyamorous relationship. Unfortunately, it doesn't usually work that way. People often stumble into it accidentally and then go, "Oh no, we're lost. What do we do?"
Oops.
We're lost, and there are no Sherpas in sight. So,
Yep. 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 Oh, amazing. Amazing. I'm curious, is there well, first of all, when does this edition of the book come out?
it just came out a couple of weeks ago.
Yes. Wonderful. Wonderful. So people can just find it in all the places that you buy books.
Yes, I really encourage people to either buy the book directly from me on my website or buy it from bookshop.org or indiebound.org because those are independent booksellers and that small profit that exists in bookselling will go to independent booksellers rather than Amazon or people we won't name
Yeah, 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 yeah. And that
who
your
don't need
website's
your money.
right.
Don't
Exactly.
they don't really need that money of yours,
Uh-huh.
those precious dollars that you have
Yeah.
spent.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really important. It's kathylabriola.com, right?
That's it.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you want to share that I haven't asked you?
Well, one thing that I would like to share is that uh, people often are surprised when they experience jealousy, and they often judge themselves or their partners for experiencing jealousy. And I always want to encourage people to be gentle with yourself and with your partners because it's a normal, natural response. And when people call me and say, "Oh gosh, I didn't think I would be jealous. I thought I was so, had done the personal growth work and I never thought I'd be jealous. I'm so shocked that I'm jealous." And I usually respond by saying, "Well, I'm shocked that you're shocked. Why wouldn't you be jealous?" It's it's a primal emotional response that comes from really that ancient reptilian part of our brain that is that fight or flight kind of survival reflex. It's a it's it's a kind of primal response to a perceived threat to our survival. And in relationships, we do have this feeling that our very survival is threatened if we think the relationship is threatened. And often the relationship is not even threatened, but we have a very strong belief that it is, that any other person coming into our relationship or being involved with our partner feels like a very primal threat to
Mhm.
us. And the fact is that any outside relationship is a potential threat. Emphasis on the word potential. Potential threat because we this is an unknown kind of situation,
Mhm.
and it can be disruptive and destabilizing to a relationship for any number of reasons. So I always encourage people to try to see it as, okay, this is potentially threatening, doesn't mean it in actuality it's threatening, but I have to trust that my instinct, there's some reason for this instinct I have. And that reason is I want to protect my relationship. This is a precious relationship. This person is a beloved, and the relationship is important to me. It's valuable to me. I want to protect the relationship. That's why I'm feeling jealous. So I need to look at why am I feeling jealous? What's going on? How can I make sure that my relationship is okay and is safe and is secure? And then I'll be able to turn down the volume on that jealousy and feel a little safer and more comfortable with this situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's so, so, so important because we have kind of really villainized jealousy as like you're doing something wrong or someone's harming you. Otherwise, you
Mhm.
absolutely shouldn't feel it when it's such a normal human emotion. It's just your nervous system going, hey, here's a thing to watch out for. Yeah.
Right, I sometimes describe it as like, some people have cars with car alarms that are a little bit overactive.
Yeah.
And the car alarm will go off if you're just walking 10 feet from it. You know,
Yes.
well, it doesn't mean you want to disconnect that car alarm because someone will steal your car. So don't disconnect your jealousy alarm, but just like turn it down, make it, a little more realistic. So, like the car alarm, you don't want it to go off until someone is actually breaking into your car.
Yeah. That's funny. As you say that, I think of my German Shepherd who the wind blows wrong and he just starts barking at all the windows. There's an intruder. I got to protect you. And I'm like, dude, relax. It's fine. Yeah.
Yes, that's a similar reaction,
Yeah.
and you don't want to disconnect the German Shepherd alarm either, in case someone
Exactly.
is breaking into the house or something.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. He's still a part of the family. It's okay.
uh,
We just got to give him some comfort.
mhm. Yeah, so I always tell people to expect jealousy and accept it. Expect
Yeah.
it and accept it. If it's whether it's you or your partner, and even if your partner, for instance, is having an extremely irrational, over the top jealousy attack, don't tell them they're wrong. Don't tell them, they're being ridiculous. That's not helping.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need to validate that they have every right to have a reaction. They have every right to feel anxious and fearful
Mhm.
and upset about this, and let's talk about it and let's see what we can do to make this whole situation work better. Is it something about my behavior that's triggering that, or is it something internal to them, something from their past? Is it something about this other partner, that there's something specific about that person that they don't like or that makes them feel distrustful? Or try to, instead of focusing on, oh, you shouldn't be jealous, focus on, well, what's going on and how can we make this situation more manageable for everyone.
Yeah.
I think we often invalidate our partners by, we're trying to make them feel better by saying, oh, you have nothing to worry about, everything's fine. But that just makes them feel like, well, you're lying to me, or or it feels like you're just minimizing you're trivializing or ridiculing my feelings. People have to have room to have their feelings. Feelings are not facts. I think that's an important thing to remember, that feelings are feelings. They don't have to be related to the actual facts of the situation. And if you just keep throwing facts at them, it's not really addressing the fact that there's a feeling there that needs to be accepted and understood, and to help them feel a little calmer, feel a little better before they can start talking about really the facts of the situation.
Yes. 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 Exactly. That's what it all comes down to is you got to calm down first. Then we can talk
Mhm,
about what's really going on.
mhm. Yeah, I haven't. I recommend to people to really try to get into the feeling state if your partner is jealous or upset about something to do with a poly relationship, because there's often this disconnect where you're going facts, 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 logic, rationality, and they're going feelings, feelings, feelings. You're not communicating. You're just not
Yes.
communicating there. So you really have to get down on the feeling level and say, well, what are they feeling? I don't, having you're not a lawyer in court arguing your case, and
Yeah.
you're not going to win over your partner with that, with a persuasive, rational argument. You're needing to get into their feeling state and understand why they're feeling the way they are, and
Yeah.
address that.
Yes. 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 Exactly. Exactly.
Or you're just going to make it worse, not
Uh,
better.
Look at that.
I see that all the time, unfortunately. So, uh, I also recommend to people to try to differentiate whether whether you're feeling jealousy or whether it's something different, whether it's envy or coveting. These three different, big, scary things can often be really confused. And I really try to encourage people to try to figure out which it is. I try to explain it as, jealousy is, it's all mine and you can't have any. Whereas coveting is, you have something I want, I'm going to steal it from you. And the third thing, envy, is, wow, you've got something going that's really great. I want some of what you have, or I want to go out and find something like it because I can see you got something really great happening. So if you could figure out which it is, usually jealousy is happens when you're in a relationship and your partner has another partner, a new partner, and you're feeling like you're going to lose something. You
Mm-hmm.
feel like all of your love and attention belongs to me, but you're giving some of it to someone else. So I'm afraid I feel like I'm losing something here. And I
Yeah.
don't want to share. I don't feel like I want to share. I feel like there's a scarcity. I don't want to share. Whereas coveting is usually if you're the person, there's some so-called outside relationship,
Mm.
you're coming into a situation where your partner has a spouse or a primary relationship, and you're seeing, well, I want that. So the only way to get it, you feel like the only way to get it is to get rid of the spouse and steal this partner away from their spouse. That's sort of the old-fashioned monogamous view.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, even though we're poly, we can be victim to that view and feel like the only way I can get what I want is to get my partner to dump their spouse so I
Yeah.
can have them, you know.
Yeah.
And we have to overcome that thinking because you can get what you want without them having to leave their spouse. And then the third thing, envy. Envy is actually the easiest one, the
Mm-hmm.
least difficult one to deal with because envy is like, wow, I see my partner has a really great relationship with their partner, their spouse. I want some of that. I want them to give me some of their time and attention because they're really great. I really want some of that. Or if I can't get that, I need to just go out and find it with someone else. I can
Yeah.
see they have a great relationship. I can admire and respect that. I can see it's possible to have a great relationship. I'm going to go out and find someone like that and have a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important to differentiate which one of those you're experiencing because then you can figure out what to do.
Or
If you
they
don't
have
know
different
which one,
solutions,
yeah,
right? They have different solutions. So
yeah,
you could be trying to solve the wrong problem, and you're not going to be looking towards the right solution, and you're going to be miserable.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love that. That's really really great. And I so appreciate you
Mhm.
sharing all of your wisdom and experience with us the way that you do so generously. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really fun having a chance to talk about all these things that are so near and dear to my heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Some of
Yes.
my
Yes.
favorite subjects.
I agree. Me too. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. Nope, we're not monogamous again. And I'm going to put your information in the show notes in case anybody missed how to reach you or the title of your book, Love and Abundance, a Counselor's Advice on Open Relationships. And thank you.
Thank you.